All right, hello. Thank you all for being here today. Our hope is that you'll leave here today with a better understanding of the diagnosis, medication management, therapy interaction, and the recovery process from our end, those living with a severe mental illness. I am Lee Formella, Director of Education Programs here at NAMI Southeast Minnesota. With me is Rae Gravenish, one of our certified peer support specialists and our current interim volunteer coordinator, and Nick Mann, also a peer support specialist and chair of the Adult Mental Health Initiative here in Olmsted County. We will all share a little bit of our story that's relevant to providers and leave time at the end for a Q&A if anybody shows up. And we do appreciate your time greatly. And we do hope they'll help in a small way. With that, we're going to start with Rae and her story.
Hi, my name is Rae. I'm a mom, a wife, and a caring friend. I enjoy quilting, reading, playing games with my family, relaxing near a lake, and watching professional Wisconsin sports with my husband. As Lee mentioned, one of my roles at NAMI Southeast Minnesota is as a certified peer support specialist. To be trained as a certified peer support specialist, you need to have a history of mental illness and be in a place of recovery. And I'm so proud to be able to say that's where I am. My mental illness journey began at age 17 when I tried to end my life. I was admitted to the adolescent psychiatric unit where I stayed for a month and was diagnosed with major depression. This was the start of over 30 years of medication, therapy, and struggles. Over the next decade, I earned a bachelor's degree in education, which took me a bit longer than some to complete. I got a full-time teaching job with some breaks in there for health reasons. And I went on to get a master's degree, which was not easy for me. To the outside world, I was functioning like everyone else, but inside and at home, I was often struggling. Over the years, I tried many medications. One would help for a bit. I'd be doing okay, then I'd struggle, so the medication I was on would be increased. And this would continue until I'd be at the maximum dosage. So then a new medication would need to be tried. Not only would I be waiting to see if this new medication would be the one that worked, I was also dealing with new side effects. It was exhausting. I was eventually labeled as having treatment-resistant depression. You may know treatment-resistant depression means that standard treatments like medication and therapy aren't enough. They may not help much at all, or for me, symptoms may improve a bit only to keep coming back. Speaking of therapy, I also saw numerous therapists over the years. With each therapist, I felt like therapy was helpful for a while, and then I just feel like I was talking about the same stuff over and over, or I'd start to feel a bit better. So I'd wrap up with that therapist, not see someone for a while, and then start with someone new. In my early 30s, I got married and became a mom. And that's when things seemed to take a turn for the worse. Postpartum depression is very real, and it added anxiety and a lot of guilt. I worried about my son. Was he safe? How would I continue to keep him safe? What if something bad happened in the future? And I worried about being a good mom all the time. I compared myself to others, and in my opinion, I was not measuring up. I felt like I wasn't doing enough ever. How could I be a good mom when I was exhausted all the time? I think one of the biggest stereotypes about people with depression is that they are lazy. If they would just get going and do something, they would feel better. It is not laziness. It's exhaustion from the mind constantly ruminating. Often the only way I could get this to stop was to sleep, and I slept a lot. I wanted to be doing better, but I had no energy to do anything, and nothing interested me. I had strong feelings of guilt and low self-worth, and I felt helpless. When my son was 2, I was hospitalized for the second time in my life, and this led to ECT treatments. I was embarrassed that I'd become this crazy, electroconvulsive therapy. I was in the hospital when I was taken for my first treatment, and my husband told me recently that when they wheeled me back to my hospital room, he He was very scared we'd made a poor decision, as I was slumped over in the wheelchair, looking very out of it, face slack, and mumbling about a bad headache. He was told they could give me some medication prior to my next treatment so I wouldn't be in the same state. And thankfully, he didn't see me quite like that again. But the headaches were a regular side effect. I think I had 8 to 12 treatments over the course of a few months, and it did seem to alleviate my symptoms, for a while anyway. ECT can be helpful. It's used for a reason, but it's not a decision to be taken lightly. It affected my memory immensely, especially during the time I was having the treatments, and that led to confusion. Things like, I once asked my mom what Walmart was, and questions like this weren't unusual. I couldn't envision how to get from place to place within Rochester, and I struggled to remember who people were outside my immediate circle of support. Thankfully, these kinds of confusion didn't last forever, but there were many things that I've had to ask friends and loved ones to tell me about, so I could pull the memory from the deep recesses of my brain somewhere. And some memories, they're just gone. 2 years later, I was hospitalized again, then an outpatient program, group therapy, and of course, med changes. Upon reflection, I think being in the hospital and especially outpatient programs was when I learned skills for dealing with the symptoms of depression. Cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, and mindfulness, along with other skills, were taught and practiced in these settings. I think that is one thing that was missing in much of my talk therapy over the years. How do I deal with depression symptoms on a day-to-day basis? When my son started kindergarten, I took a leave of absence from my teaching job. I never went back. I did some volunteer work and helped out at my son's school, but without my job as my identity and feeling like a failing stay-at-home mom, I floundered. Over the next 10 years, things seemed to only get worse. At times, I didn't want to live my life anymore. I had suicidal ideations on a regular basis, but I knew I couldn't leave my son and husband to pick up the pieces. So I slept as much as possible to cope. I could barely get myself out of bed, let alone take a shower. My body felt so heavy all the time, and I had digestive issues and pain. When I was awake, I distracted my brain in any way I could. Online games, reading, podcasts, music, putting together puzzles. But I felt like a shell that showed up places when I had to be. Any kind of relationship was tough. I felt useless and empty, and I didn't have anything to give to others to support my side of things. And so I felt very alone. In the fall of 2022, after a very rough previous winter, I decided to prepare for what would be coming, a dark season. Though I don't have seasonal depression, late fall and winter have always been the hardest. There are a few things that I believe work together to get me to a place of having stable mental health. First, I advocated for a medicine change to a category of antidepressants that I hadn't tried in many years. It seemed to work, and it gave me enough of a boost or a lift to help me make other changes. I also found a new therapist. I hadn't had one in 4 years, and when I didn't feel a connection with the first one, I tried another. After learning about something called a Wellness and Recovery Plan, or WRAP, W-R-A-P, I took an online class through the Copeland Center, which helped me create one of my own. The process of creating this plan forced me to reflect on what helps me feel better and what stresses me out. It improved my ability to deal with symptoms of depression on a daily basis and to notice when I'm starting to slip and what to do about it. But what I think helped the most is that I started volunteering regularly at NAMI Southeast Minnesota, which made me feel useful and productive and like maybe I could work again. It also gave me a feeling of connection with others that I had been missing. Additionally, I started attending one of their support groups. And with all of this together, I started to feel better. and it lasted. Now I work at NAMI and I feel productive and capable. I think being a certified peer support specialist helps because I want to be there for others who struggle. When I meet with peers, I focus on actively listening, validating their feelings, offering encouragement, and sharing parts of my story when asked. Those I work with are relieved to talk with someone who actually understands, who's had similar experiences and is doing well. I'll admit, I've been waiting for the ominous crash for more than 18 months now. Mind you, I've had dips and a little fear creeps in, but that's when I take a day off to take care of myself, to do something fun with a friend or complete a project at home or go for a walk instead of just sleeping. Although I do need to make sure I am getting the right amount of that. Or I talk through things with one of the supportive people in my life instead of just isolating. And I've had to realize that my normal is not the same as others' normal, and that is okay. In preparation for this talk, I wanted to make sure I had an important conversation with my 16-year-old son. He knows about my long history of depression, and he's seen the old me, who lays in bed most of the time, unable to deal with the world. Thankfully, he's also seen the new me, who has a job and checks in with him regularly to see how he's feeling and supports him in any way I can. But I had never talked with him about how I tried to end my life at age 17 and hospitalizations and how depression sometimes runs in families and what to look out for. After sharing more of my story with him, he hugged me and said, "I'm proud of you, Mom. And let me tell you, that just might keep me going for a long time." Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Rae. That was a beautiful story. Incredibly well done. Your vulnerability is awesome. So thank you for sharing so much. Truly. With that, we'll turn it over to Nick here. Let him introduce himself and go through his story.
My name is Nicholas Mann. I'm a husband, son, brother, uncle, and friend. My diagnoses are schizoaffective disorder, which is schizophrenia and depression together, post-traumatic stress disorder, and obsessive compulsive disorder. I've been hospitalized 9 times between 2007 and 2018. And as an adult, and 2 times as a teen. I love to fish. I'm a gamer. I like playing cards. I like to hunt. And I love reading Western novels and outdoor magazines. When I was a teenager, I smoked a lot of pot, which led to me skipping school, not doing homework. During that time in school, I was sexually harassed a lot, which led to me being truant. And when I was 17, I attempted suicide and I was hospitalized. As a young adult, I was diagnosed with OCD, and I basically didn't care. I refused meds, just lived on the way I wanted to live on. And then when I was 22, I joined a program called the Catholic Charities Volunteer Corps, in which I did a year of service with the homeless with 18 other people who worked in various settings throughout the Twin Cities. With that year of service, it opened my eyes to a lot. I grew up in the suburbs, a fancy neighborhood, and then joining the volunteer corps and working at a drop-in shelter in South Minneapolis really opened my eyes to how the world really worked. During that year, I met my wife, who was also in the program. We were friends for a few years, and then we started dating and were married in 2005. Around that time, my symptoms started. I was experiencing paranoia, anxiety, episodes of panic, and I had a great deal of conspiracy theories. I was diagnosed with schizophrenia after I had a breakdown at work. I sought help through the local hospital and I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. It took me a while to adjust to a life with a diagnosis. I started cognitive behavioral therapy with my therapist, which helped a lot, helping me, learn tools and tricks to, help me stay on track. And through that time, I went through many medication changes. I was heavily medicated. I could never get off the couch. I was depressed. I was foggy. I forgot things. And I had a job in Red Wing where I worked for 5 years. And in 2010, I lost my job because I fell asleep at my desk because of over medication, and I was let go. After I was let go that summer, I started the disability process through Social Security. It was a 1 year wait until 2011 when I was diagnosed or when I was awarded disability status. And one thing about how I went about that process was I was very proactive. I advocated for myself. I received help from my doctors and social workers, which is a key part of going through the disability process because you have to be interested and proactive in order to get that status. In my, all my adult life, I've been living with mental illness. After I lost my job in 2010, I started becoming active in the community. I volunteered at the local nursing home. I attended a guitar group through my social worker and also a lunch group with people in my same situation. I joined CRESS in 2012, which is a adult mental health initiative in the southeastern 10 counties of Minnesota. It stands for Creating Resources, Education, Services, Technology, which, doesn't really make sense for what we do, but it's basically an adult mental health initiative. And I've been doing that since 2012, and now I'm the chair of that committee. So doing that, I felt like I was advocating for myself as well as my peers who don't have a voice. And I really enjoy doing that. And I finally felt like I was contributing to something, even if it was just one meeting a month. In 2014, I developed a diagnosis of diverticulitis, which basically means that your colon stops working. So in October of 2014, I had my colon removed. It was a major surgery, and what they did, not to go into gory details, but it did not work, and I had to have an emergency service surgery, and I was given an ostomy bag on my stomach. I'll have to say about that, it was the worst 6 months of my life. I felt gross. My bag was leaked. I had to help from my wife, who was a saint. It was just really, really bad time in my life, a low point in my life. And I don't know if I would have done I don't know how I got through it. I was reconnected 6 months later, connecting my bowels back to where they should be. And it was a major adjustment in my life because the colon does certain things to your body that your colon does certain jobs for your body and when that's not there, it takes a major adjustment. I was in a depressed state, and in 2018, I was admitted to the St. Luke's Hospital in Duluth, where I spent 3 weeks doing a major medication change, which actually ended up saving my life. I was feeling a lot better. I met a therapist who specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy. And because of my PTSD, I was going to therapy once a week, doing exposure therapy, they call it, where I was exposed to the things that made me have PTSD in the first place. And I finally felt like I was, moving forward. And throughout that time, after 2018 being stable, I began doing things I loved again. When I was going through a really rough time, I had given away my firearms for hunting because I just wanted to be safe. I wanted the people around me to be safe. And I told myself if I could be stable for 3 years, I would pick up hunting again. And that is what I did. And it was good for me to do small goals. And that's ended up going back to Crest. We took a 2-year break because of the pandemic. And then we started meeting in person in the spring of 2023. And that's where I met my current supervisor, Matthew Bjorngard. And he invited me to volunteer at NAMI, go to the NAMI Con in Minneapolis. And I really started learning about NAMI. And I also started volunteering here at NAMI Southeast. That summer of 2023, a certified peer support specialist training opened up, and NAMI offered to pay for the class. And then once that was done, I was hired here at NAMI Southeast. And working here, I really feel like people believe in me. It helps to have support, people know what you're going through truly. And that's such a big help in my life. And I also enjoy the work. It is very empowering. And I finally feel like I have a purpose. And in conclusion, I want to put an emphasis on the fact that I had a ton of support, family, friends, clergy, social workers, therapists, and that's not always the case with people with mental illness. And so I consider myself lucky because I had the support. And if you ever know of someone that needs support, give it and give it all you've got. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Again, also extremely vulnerable. Appreciate that greatly. So my turn, I suppose. As a little reintroduction, my girlfriend and I moved to the Rochester area last summer from Wisconsin, so we are still pretty new. But we lead a pretty quiet and simple life, but active and fulfilling at the same time. I truly enjoy spending time with my girlfriend of over 3 years and my family, including my 3 younger siblings, my 3 nephews, and 1 wonderful niece. I really enjoy running, most recently picked up trail running in the wonderful state parks and cliffs that we have around here, and I probably watch a little bit too much basketball, if I'm being honest. I did recently start this new job here, less than 3 months ago. I truly love the position so far. At the same time, it's been an incredible challenge, but it is one that is helping to further my confidence and my sense of community, 2 things I think Rae and Nick also talked about. I really enjoy sharing my story in person and on social media, but mostly to give my friends, my girlfriend, and my parents a break since it's really all I talk about in general anyways. But that's kind of where I am today. And how did I get here? Let's go back. Though I wouldn't realize it until after I was diagnosed, my symptoms started at least in high school, but likely quite a bit earlier than that. I threw amazing tantrums up until about middle school. While in high school, I would get much more excited than my peers at times, yet I lived most of my life, even then, in a very deep depression. Starting in college, those symptoms increased with my alcohol consumption and stress levels. Gambling, I blacked out consistently. I lived with suicidal ideations, ruined relationships, failed jobs, and constant pain and confusion. That last part is often overlooked and very overlooked in my opinion. My muscles were cramping and in shooting pain every day, just from the stress and the angst that I was living with. And whether it was from a hangover or massive internal pressure, my head just always felt on the verge of imploding. And I just wanted out of it, if I'm being honest. Yet somehow throughout all of that, I still graduated college. Now, I drank and I gambled to fall asleep. Every minute of every day felt like forever. The only way of getting out of my head was to do those two things. There was no getting ahead in life. There was no planning in any way. Every decision was impulsive, and it was intended to make that instant feel bearable. I wasn't acquiring the life skills of my peers, and I was falling further and further behind. This left me feeling even more alone and even more isolated as things went on. Worse yet, I didn't know how bad it was. And in another way of putting it, I didn't know I was sick or how sick I was. I want to make this really clear as I move on here. I'm not placing any blame, and we'll get to the good parts, I promise, but just relaying some of the history. Looking back, there were a lot of times where I think that there were missed opportunities, as I say them. There were times where somebody could have stepped in, shown a different level of concern or a deeper level of care. They weren't wrong, but as you'll hear, that's what it eventually took like to get my diagnosis. I was not very healthy in my 20s. When you drink and gamble every night for 10 hours, you don't tend to be. I was in and out of the doctor's office all the time for what turned out to be polyps in my colon. This is only relevant because we talked about my drinking so much at all these office visits, but it was always only from a physical health standpoint. None of them expressed how out of the ordinary it might have been. Yeah, I was young and in college, but I had graduated then and I was out in the workforce. And nobody asked if there might be something deeper going on. Was it their job? Not necessarily, but it might have helped, and it would have certainly helped somebody else. So I wanted to bring it up because I don't know if I was ready or not in that moment, but I know that the topic wasn't broached, so I wasn't given the opportunity. Somebody might be ready in that moment, give them that chance to get better. So the same story was repeated multiple times in different scenarios. I was taken to detox twice. I was taken in for an overnight hold twice, actually also for wellness checks. I had staples in my head, I had multiple stitches, entirely sliced quadriceps, burns, infections, you name it, all from drinking. Again, the usual refrain without nobody really holding my feet to my fire. It was, you need to stop drinking. It was, you're drinking too much, but never, why are you drinking so much? Where is this coming from? But neither did myself, my parents, or my friends. My dad recently said, "You must have known how bad it was." I didn't. I really just thought I was weak, or I wasn't as smart, or I was somehow deficient from everybody else. I didn't know I was sick, to repeat it. So it's, again, definitely not to blame anyone, but just the thought that it's very worth having these hard conversations, bringing up these difficult questions. You can save a life and change a life by doing so. My first therapist got in on the act. He was super nice, he was warm, he was caring, and he meant well. The problem was he was either too religious or too proud to refer me to a psychiatrist or even bring up the possibility of medication. I believe I even asked him about it at one point, but it never happened. This was a crucial mistake in my view and could have resulted in a diagnosis as much as 5 years earlier and prevented a lot more trauma. Pride is a deadly sin for a reason, but eventually I did meet the rest of the professionals who saved my life, provided the future. My diagnosis was the result of two forces: extraordinarily lucky and a willingness to try anything that might help. One might say I reached a rock bottom, but it was just one of maybe hundreds of rock bottoms. I was in the midst of my best month of ever selling cars. I was making literally the most money I'd ever made in my life, and it was warm in August, and everything seemed to be fine. Yet here's where the bipolar comes in. I was miserable. I was depressed. I didn't want to continue. I've been living this way for probably 20 years, and I remember getting on the highway and screaming to the phone of my dad, and eventually going home and saying I was done. I was finished. I truly couldn't do it anymore. I was going to get on the highway and keep driving. I didn't know if I was going to come back. Well, the luck was the next morning I had my first appointment with my primary care physician in over 10 years. My dad convinced me to go and see him, and this saved my life and changed it. He was incredibly understanding. He was polite and warm and asked me those difficult questions, asked me about my drinking, but took it a step further and said, can I ask you more questions about why you might be drinking, about who you might be, and about what's going on? And I said, yes. And he took his time. And what he did is he referred me to somebody he trusted. He gave me an idea of what he thought he might have, but he said, this isn't my specialty. I would like to send you to somebody who is. He sent me to my psychiatric APMP, who is an absolute angel. She's my angel in many ways. She diagnosed me with bipolar disorder type 2 with major depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and PTSD. She took her time in explaining the diagnosis, what it meant, what my treatment options were, and made me an integral part of my own recovery from day one. She didn't tell me what to take or say you should really take these two things. She asked me what I might feel comfortable with. It gave me that empowerment from the beginning. And so, yeah, basically that agency in my recovery was integral, and I believe that's the case for everybody. It wasn't all roses though. The next 18 months were probably the hardest of my life. Things did get incrementally better, but not nearly as much as I had hoped. I was still drinking and gambling to the points of losing all the money in my bank account and blacking out. Until my sister essentially told me that I'd be cut off if I kept doing so. If I kept creating that chaos in the family, she couldn't have me around my nephews, and I understood. But what it did is it lit a fire under my ass that I had previously not seen or known was in me. That's what started the real recovery part of my journey. My first therapist was after this. Was a good person, but unfortunately didn't know anything about bipolar disorder and misrepresented her level of knowledge of it. She ended up Googling answers to my questions within the first 3 sessions, and let's say that was the last time I went in. It took me a long time to go back. It took another more prodding and pushing from those that I loved and another deep depression. But when I did it right. I searched high and low for a therapist who was well-versed in bipolar disorder. I found one who had worked with people like myself for over 20 years. If there's any way that you ever get the opportunity to refer somebody, refer them to people who know what they're doing, who have those extraordinarily high levels of competency in severe mental illnesses. You might be the best therapist in the world or the best family therapist in the world, but it doesn't mean you might not or might know enough about my bipolar disorder to help me. Eventually, like I said, I found the new one, and she was absolutely incredible. She was specialized and able to help me, most importantly, manage my symptoms, recognize my red flags, and help with coming episodes. She also helped build my confidence and implored me not to limit myself, but instead to find my limits slowly, safely, and reassess as I go. Now, she also left me with one fantastic gift, which was she told me to find a trauma therapist, which I did, and now we're working on those physiological symptoms. I'm sweating less, even while I'm here doing this. And it's giving me insights into the generalized anxiety, the co-occurring illnesses, and how they might work out between each other. My confidence is at an all-time high, not because I'm healed, not because I'm cured, but because I have so much help and because I'm managing things well. It's not all their help, I have to say. I've incorporated so many skills and healthy habits into my life. I started limiting my alcohol use, and now I don't drink at all. At this point in my life, I'm aware of how even a few sips, we just talked about it earlier today, can change the way my brain works. And it limits my cognitive functioning. It takes me so long to get that brain back to where it feels normal. I eat healthy most of the time. I exercise regularly, which sometimes mean a leisurely walk or a leisurely bike ride if I don't have that energy. I engage my family and my support network when I need to, really at the moment's notice. I get 8 hours of sleep if I can, unplug when I need to, ask for help when it can make things more bearable, take breaks when I need them, and generally, if you can't tell, fashion all my life around mental health and that of others. And I found social media to be a wonderful place to share my story, but also to meet so many other people who live with bipolar disorder, who live with severe mental illnesses, who can commiserate, but also help with little tips and tricks. Sometimes I guess I'll put it this way. I never thought I'd say that I'd be on social media or that it would be such an integral part of my life, but don't count out those random things that might help. Don't talk yourself out of things that just because it sounds weird or somebody might judge you. If it helps and it's safe, do it. Everything I've done in the last 18 months has been new, I started my own website while I started volunteering with NAMI back in Wisconsin. I started writing for International Bipolar Foundation and now have a YouTube channel that, if we're lucky, a few people are going to watch this on. And that led to volunteering here with NAMI Southeast Minnesota and this full-time job. I don't say those things to brag. I say those things because if I don't, I almost don't believe them. It feels weird every day. But I'm doing what I love every day. And I continue to say I found a job and a passion that I never knew I had. And I feel so lucky to have actually made it. And I say that because there's always hope. No matter who you're working with, no matter who you see on the other side of that table, no matter who you see in the room, there is always hope. You never know what somebody can be capable of, truthfully. I barely made it through my first presentation 18 months ago and didn't think that my brain and my body could do another one. I've since done about 15, maybe even up to 20 since I've written this. And hopefully the next step is getting a master's program in the fall to help counsel other people who live with the same condition I do and other ones. I can't think of a better way to spend the rest of my life than that. Again, there is hope for everyone. Some of us do just need a little bit more help. Some of us need a little bit more time. But always hold on to that hope, not only for yourself, but for others. Give them those opportunities. Give them every chance you can. You truly never know what tomorrow might bring. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Lee.